So hi everyone, my name is Molly, and as the slide shows, I'm going to talk about my career so far working for the North Pennines AONB partnership. So who am I? Just a quick overview of who I am. So I grew up in Wales on a family smallholding. So I spent a lot of time around farm animals, and my family are all vets as well. So lots of time on farms. And then I went on to study human geography and environment at the University of York, where there I grew an interest in sustainable agriculture and more of the farming community. A lot of that, my last year was during COVID, and it really made me understand the importance of food security and supporting our British farmers. During that time I volunteered for environmental charities, the local wildlife trust, things like that. And then in April 2021 I moved up north from Worcestershire and started working for the AONB. So I don't know who's in the crowd, so I have no idea who knows where the North Pennines AONB is, but here's a map. It's obviously east of Newcastle in the centre of the Pennines, and here's a really shoddy zoomed in map which is quite blurry, but that just gives you an idea. And as the AONB partnership, our priorities are 1, nature recovery, and 2, trying to engage people with nature and the heritage. So what makes the AONB so special? Just some of the important parts of our landscape. So we have 40% of the UK's upland hay meadows, which is one of the rarest grassland habitats in the UK. We've lost, I think it's 97% since the 1930s, so that's pretty significant. So it's a really important landscape for the wildflowers. A hotspot for breeding waded birds such as curlew, lapwing, other species. An important place for dark sky, so we've got 16 dark sky discovery sites. And the North Pennines contains 30% of England's upland heathland and 27% of its blanket bogs. So all in all, as you can tell, it's quite a special landscape to be working in. So I work for the AONB on a programme called T-Swell Naturally Connected, where I started as a trainee, and now I'm the farming support officer for the programme. So the programme I work on is a 5-year lottery funded programme with lots of different funders and partners, as you can see here. And the green outline is our programme outline. So above is the North Pennines, and there's also the Yorkshire Dales. So it's a joint partnership between the AONB and the Yorkshire Dales National Park. So this is our programme outline. It's the southern part of the North Pennines, and then that yellow border there is the Yorkshire Dales National Park. So it takes in Upper Teesdale. You can, if you know Teesdale, that's Cowgreen Reservoir at the top left of our programme boundary, Bouldersdale, Loondale, and then it takes Arkingarthdale and Swaledale within the Yorkshire Dales National Park. So why was this place, this boundary chosen? So there's lots of priority habitat within this area, such as blanket bog, Camelarian grassland, hay meadows, and there's also a lot of our programme areas protected sites. That's SSSIs, SPAs. It stands for Site of Special Scientific Interest. So our programme has 3 main themes. I'm mostly going to talk about the nature recovery, but there's other officers that work to do with community engagement, engaging children, youth groups, things like that. But I'm going to chat about our nature recovery work today. So first of all, restoring 1,250 hectares of peatland. So this is done by the Peatland team at the AONB, and the idea of this is to try and raise the water table and slow the flow of water going off the fells and into the lower down towns and cities. So it has a really big landscape effect, and that's through lots of different means, trying to increase the vegetation and putting in more infrastructure like dams, etc. Restoring species-rich grassland. So as I said, it's one of the really important places in the North Pennines is for our upland hay meadows, with lots of rare species. So we restore upland hay meadows through 2 different means. Green hay restoration, so you're taking off a species-rich donor crop off of a hay meadow which has lots of your desirable species, cutting that and then having that as a donor onto your less species-rich meadow. So you're scarifying the ground of the one that you want to restore and putting that fresh green hay onto it. Next up, the rush management for breeding waders. So soft rush can be quite an issue for farmers. So taking over farmland and making the vegetation less desirable. And although birds such as curlew and snipe, they like it relatively dense, so we're not saying remove all the rush, but try and keep a mosaic of habitat. So you've got lots of different areas. You obviously want rush as well. The farmers want it for the lambs, etc., to hide in and sleep in. Linking to that as well, so creating the programme, we're helping create wetlands and scrapes. So it's really important that all year round the breeding waders that I mentioned, they have feeding ground. So we're talking about sort of shallow scrapes and ponds so that they can feed into the edges. And planting trees and scrubs. So there's lots of funding out there now for the increase in tree cover, but a lot of the work we do is actually smaller scale. So it's planting in gills and rough corners of fields that may not be that productive for the farmer's business, and it's just giving back to nature and trying to connect up those habitats. Then there's a programme that's working on diffuse metal pollution. So a lot of the North Pennines, there's a rich mining heritage. So lead mining, for example, and a lot of the spore heaps that are still there in the landscape, it's not trying to move them out, but just make sure that that sediment is kept in the place and it's not distributing into the watercourses. And then finally, there's a programme on enhancing the river greta. So I should say all of this, what we're doing is trying to work with farmers in these areas, Teesdale, Loondale, Baldersdale, Arkengarthdale and Swaledale, to try and help encourage nature-friendly farming on their farms. And a lot of them are doing a lot of this already, but it's trying to help give them the funding towards doing so. And ultimately to try and help them produce food and have a sustainable business. So within all of this, that's kind of broadly what the programme I work on covers, but what do I actually do? These are just some nice pictures, they don't have any relevance. So a big part of my job is going out and surveying these important rare habitats that I've spoken about. So for example, my first year as a trainee, I went to do a peatland survey, and that was up actually outside of our programme area, Geltsdale, which is in Cumbria. And also undertaking upland hay meadow surveys. So as I spoke about the restoration, we survey the meadows before and after restoration to try and understand not only has the restoration been successful, are there more plants, but also to kind of give feedback to the farmer and say, to make them aware of sort of what they've got in their meadows. Those are some of the flowers. I don't know why I chose those ones actually. Some of the two on the bottom are important in our hay meadows. So that's glowflower on the bottom right, the yellow flower there, and devil's bit scabious. They're two of the rarer ones. I could have put a whole slide of images, but don't know why I chose those. Oh, and also bee surveys, so pollinator surveys. So we're also trying to work out the link between when we're restoring upland hay meadows and trying to increase the species of wildflowers in the meadow. Is that also increasing the number of pollinators that are coming? So we've got volunteers going out to do bee surveys basically. So they walk in a certain route. It's like a 1 kilometre route encompassing different habitats. So not just the meadow we've restored, but kind of controlled meadows or habitats either side of that, and to try and understand whether over time there are more pollinators. So a lot of the work I do as well is working with volunteers. So within our team we run training courses so that we can train up skilled volunteers in botany or in seed collecting, for example. I also just realised I spoke about 2 methods of hay meadow restoration, but I only spoke about one. So that I'm going to bring that in now. So the other way that we restore meadows is through plug planting. So that's collecting seed like I'm doing with the volunteer on the left. We were seed collecting ragged robin. So we seed collect local provenance seeds and then sow them and look after them for a year. Volunteers help look after them. And then they grow into this little plant here. I think that's a glowflower. And then we plant those into the edges of meadows. So the reason that there's two methods of restoration of the hay meadows, the green hay is great when you've already got quite a few species already, but the plug plants, it's trying to increase the species that are flowering later and setting seed later. So over time, as we've got kind of bigger farm machinery, etc., farmers are sometimes cutting the hay meadows before all of the flowers in there have set seeds, so we're starting to lose some of these species. So what we're doing is when we're collecting, growing on these small plug plants, we're growing on those that are kind of being lost in the meadow and then planting them in the edges where the farmer doesn't take their cutting machinery. Hopefully that makes sense. I just reeled that off, but I'm hoping that makes sense. So going back to working with volunteers, which takes up a lot of the work that I do, also volunteer events. So, like I said, the seed collecting, and not only do we collect seeds of wildflowers, but also trees as well. So local provenance trees. We've just collected juniper from Upper Teesdale, which is a rare species that grows kind of higher up. It's been an interesting one. It takes a long time to grow on, and I know that I'm sure Lee might mention it later, but they've been growing at Haweswater as well. And we went to visit them actually, which was really interesting to learn from their tree nursery. So we also do hedge and tree planting and quadrat days with volunteers. So lots of work for volunteers. We couldn't do a lot of the work we do without volunteers because we only have so many people in our team, but it's great that we have a whole host of volunteers that come out with us. So as I said, a lot of our program is working alongside farmers to try and increase kind of nature recovery on their farms. So a lot of my time is spent going out and visiting farmers, whether they be new farmers or farmers that we've known before, to chat about opportunities on their farm. And is there a corner they'd like to put a few trees in, or things like that. So a lot of my time is spent visiting the farmers, and then also a massive part of working with farmers is trying to get them to collaborate, which sometimes can be easier said than done. But here in this picture, that was a meeting we had with farmers about soil carbon. So we've just, it was a farming and protected landscape scheme, which is another DEFRA fund. So it was through that fund that we were able to test soil on 10 different farms in Teesdale. And I think a lot of the farmers are now understanding the importance of soil health, linking into kind of, it's what's under the ground that actually has a big impact on what's above the ground. So that was really interesting. And we have found throughout the programme that a lot more of the farmers, a lot of these, well, there's not that many that came to that meeting, but when we have more people, which can be tough to get because, it's not on the top of everyone's agenda and you've got to be quite realistic with it. But it's nice to see when, neighbours come together and chat about these things. And then we also have people come and chat. So down here, this gentleman was talking about rush management. We've had a lady that came from the Farm Carbon Toolkit. So she was the lady that actually inspired loads of farmers. And I know that sounds a bit cliche saying inspired, but she did. They were all really, really interested, and hence that led on to our programme about soil testing. And then aside from the work with farmers and volunteers, something slightly different that's not as linked to nature recovery is I also work on trying to increase and enhance the rights of way network in the North Pennines. So I just thought these pictures were quite funny when I was out doing some surveys. It's like, what can a farmer find to tie their gate up? And that one was funny. That's like a electrical cable, which is just, yeah. So, and Bailey's fine, you can't go wrong. But so the idea of this programme, it's also part of T-Swale, so it's trying to reduce the barriers to people coming out and enjoying the countryside. So, if that's replacing stiles for gates, removing that kind of accessibility barrier, or maybe increasing the signposting on routes so people that, don't feel so comfortable walking in the countryside can come out, and easier for them if they're not so comfortable or used to it. And then a big part of my work at the moment is trying to develop a Tramper network within the AONB. So a Tramper is a vehicle, I guess that's what you call it. It's an off-road mobility scooter essentially. So we've got various routes around the North Pennines whereby people can come and use the scooter to get to places that they might normally be able to get to, rather than just being left in the cafe or left in the car to, I don't know, twiddle their thumbs. It's actually really nice to open up these landscapes to more, more people with more abilities. So that is the Tramper network, and I can't remember. Oh, and that's me. So that was a very brief overview.